Sorry about not doing a video on Saturday, but Friday was totally crazy for me, so I just didn't get a chance to shoot and edit and get any of that done. Something that I wanted to talk to about today is something that all of us would be going through. It's the evolution of a watch collector. And I think most of us, I think a lot of people, or I certainly started with fashion brands. Like Guess, I had a lot of Guess watches, Guess collection watches, one of which I still have. I talked about that in my Dirty Little Secrets video. And the other one that I don't necessarily consider a fashion brand, but I think a lot of people probably do, are Fossil watches. I mean, I must have had at one point maybe 12 Fossil watches, if not more. And I think that several people stay at that level, right? They're quite happy just getting them because they find them aesthetically pleasing, and they don't delve into it any more than that. For us, though, it's it's my super fancy How to Train Your Dragon 2 cup. Those of you with kids know all about that, and maybe some of you without. No judgment here. But then there's some of us that eventually start to maybe like the watches as more than fashion accessories, which arguably they end up back being in some way, shape, or form. But we start to kind of get into maybe the history of the watch, or more interestingly, you start to look up what you think the best watches are, what the best bang per buck in a certain price point is, and we end up either on the internet or inevitably here on YouTube. I think it's pretty safe to say you land on a mechanical watch. And then at that point, I think watch collecting, for the most part, or watch enthusiasts, end up in what I'll call kind of a pyramid scheme, or something very like the tier system, where as you learn more about watches, and as you're willing to spend a little bit more on watches, or as finances allow, you kind of start at what most people would call entry-level watches, and you start to enjoy having some mechanical options. Inevitably, most people are drawn to Seiko, a very historied brand with in-house movement, yada, yada, yada. You guys know all about that. And at some point, you start to feel, and this is maybe just me, I'm going to get into specifically my evolution. At some point, as you research different brands, and you read different blogs, or you watch different people's videos, and Simon and I have talked about this before, you start to think or feel, or I started to think and feel early on, that, you know, it's kind of this pyramid scheme where you start at the entry level tiers, and you feel compelled at some point, or I felt compelled at some point, to start to move up those tiers. And in some way, shape, or form, you know, you hear the mantra that all roads lead to Rolex. Ironically, a brand I'll probably never buy. But as enthusiasts, we start to feel like we need to move up these brands, and some models or brands end up being better than others, or more worth having, more worth your time, more worth your money, however you want to spin it. I think that a lot of people stay locked into this kind of scheme. This is my super fancy display like that. Get kind of locked into this theme, this feeling that you start at the lower level, whatever you want to consider that, whether it's Timex, Seiko 5s, whatever you would put in that, and then inevitably start to move up. Hamilton, Tissot, Longines, Omega, the list goes on, right? I think where the real breakthrough happens, though, and this is where it happened for me, is when you break open the top of that. And that doesn't happen by getting a Rolex, or getting a JLC, or getting anything else. That's not what that represents to me. That happens with what I'd consider enlightenment. And I don't mean this in this kind of like super profound, Johnny Casual kind of way, or how Jeffrey McMahon would break it down much more eloquently than I'd be able to. But I mean in a way where you become more secure in your knowledge, in being able to research your own brands, and being able to find the components that are most important to you. Generally, I break down a watch into a few categories. The first category being aesthetics, right? I obviously need to like the way it looks. Then the history and heritage of the brand. Then you have the mechanics of what's going on behind the dial. And then there is the construction and materials used to compose that. I think early on, in terms of those 4 categories, the thing that mattered to me the most, and to most of us the most, was that aesthetics piece, liking what it looked like, and that pretty much determined what we ended up getting. And then you start to pay attention a little more. You start to wonder, well, what's the story behind Seiko, or what's the story behind Citizen, or any other brand that you start to look into, and you think, man, some of these companies have hundreds of years of experience, and they have this reputation within the watch enthusiast world. And you start to think, I get that, the intricacies of the development of the movement, the years that it took to perfect that, the history that it has in any particular field. And you start to want to be part of that. Then there's the mechanics, the complexity of a component, its significance horologically in terms of that history. And then, of course, there's the construction materials. You start to expect certain things at certain price points. You see the pros versus the cons of certain things like mineral crystal as opposed to sapphire. And you start to think, oh, well, these things they make the watch sturdier, and you're willing to pay the extra money for that. But at some point, you get caught at the top of that pyramid, what everybody tells you that you're supposed to have. And I think that's where you end up with a lot of opinions. Say, oh, well, this is crap, that's crap, you shouldn't get this, you shouldn't get that. And where I think you can break out of that, where you reach enlightenment, if you will, is when you're able to say, hey, no, you know what? These are the things that's important to me with this particular purchase. Maybe you don't care about history for that one. Maybe you don't care about the mechanics specifically for that piece. Maybe it's just about the aesthetics. And you finally reach this point where, yes, you can appreciate the history of a brand like Rolex, or you can appreciate a company with the history of any other brand, but you can appreciate it without feeling like you need to own it. And that's kind of where I've gotten with a lot of things. You can appreciate other brands, particularly micro brands that often get shafted because they're casing companies, right? They're using pre-existing stock movements. Maybe they're regulating them, maybe they aren't. They put them in their own design and they send them out the door with their name on the dial. And at a certain point, a lot of people will scoff at that, like, oh, well, you should have spent the money on Hamilton, or you should have spent the money on Tissot at that price point, or you should never buy Tag, whatever the case may be. What ends up happening, sorry, somebody's mowing their lawn. And the conversation that Simon and I had is that, he was mentioning, hey, eventually you'll get to where you want to have these and you don't want to waste your time with any of those watches. And I'm happy to say that he was wrong. Simon, if you're watching this, you're not going to get to say I told you so. But in some ways, he was right. It's really bizarre because I did get what you consider a luxury brand, right? I did end up with a JLC. But not because I feel like I needed it to validate myself, but because I took the time to learn about that brand, and that brand was something that meant something to me personally, based on what I had learned about it. And because over time you learn more about things, you can appreciate something for what it is. And what that means for me is that I'm never going to look down on any other brand. I'm never going to look down on any other model, any other reference, particularly not micro brands. I love micro brands for what they bring to the table. And the thing is, no, they don't carry that 100 and something years of history, but everybody starts somewhere. And does it mean that $250 Oberst Morgan was crap and you should have bought an SKX? No, absolutely not. I don't believe that. I think, a micro brand like that brings its own unique design to the table, and that's something that should be appreciated. It's carrying an incredibly, for example, that one has the Miyota 9015 movement, perfectly respectable workhorse movement. There's no shame in that, absolutely not. So I think part of the beauty is I would hope that as collectors, we don't get caught up in this magnificently displayed pyramid where you're stuck at the top and you think you have to work your way at the top, and that there's nowhere else that you should be or nowhere else that you can be and have added value or be a legitimate enthusiast of any kind. I rather hope that most of us evolve to, maybe you find yourself in that triangle at some point, but you're able to break through the top where you can appreciate what every single type of piece at its price point is able to bring to the table. And the fact that at a minimum, particularly micro brands, they bring a lot of people into the fold. So the hope for me in my personal journey was to be able to grow past seeing, price tags and brands that other people say is important, and being able to appreciate brands like HMT, which is a hugely significant brand in India shortly after they declared their independence. So, but if you're only wrapped around these big price tag watches and what other people tell you you're supposed to like, you can't appreciate brands like that. And for me, I think that's sad. So that's pretty much the end of this video, just my thoughts on the evolution of a watch collector, and I'd love to get your perspective. If you enjoyed this video, found it useful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And as always, if this is your first time here, don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this. that's it for this one. CG, out.